2025 Puma Running. Puma is a newer brand to me. Back in early 2024, I bought my first Puma shoe. Not my first Puma running shoe, my first Puma shoe that I've ever owned. And that was the Velocity Nitro 3. And I was hugely impressed. I quickly fell in love with that shoe. The versatility of that shoe, the feel of that shoe, outstanding shoe. But the next couple Puma shoes that I tried after that, mixed results. One of them I swore I'd never mention again on this channel, though I'm lifting that because I have to talk about it in this video. So Puma was a very mixed sort of reception to me, but I was really impressed with the Velocity Nitro 3. Fast forward to 2025, and I tried the Velocity Nitro 4 this year, this shoe, and this is a shoe I've quickly fallen in love with, and I did try the Fast R3, one of the probably most popular shoes of the year. The one that definitely has the most hype on it. I made a bunch of content on that shoe. Now, on the strength of this shoe specifically, I am elevating Puma to be one of the core brands that I cover on this channel moving forward into 2026. So I thought it'd be good to sit down, talk about where Puma netted out in 2025 and what I'm looking for in 2026. This is the fourth and final part of a four-part series that I'm doing where I'm going over the four primary brands that I'll be focused on this channel in 2026. That's Asics, Adidas, Nike, and Puma. So now that this is the final video, you can find links to the other three videos in this series in the description. With that being said, let's get into Puma Running. When I look at a brand's overall lineup, I'm really looking for three categories: trainers, tempo, and race. And for Puma, they have these four very diverse trainers. Starting with the Velocity Nitro 4, that is their all-arounder, aggressive, basic, low stack. It's everything that I love in a shoe. It is outstanding. They have the Magnify Nitro 3. It's a shoe that's a little bit more foam than the Velocity Nitro 4, but still an overall performance daily trainer. There's the Mag Max Nitro, which is their Max Stack Max Cushion trainer, and the Magnify Nitro 3 really slots in nicely between the Velocity Nitro 4 and the Mag Max. And then there's the Forever Run Nitro 2, which is the brand's stability trainer, but still a very responsive stability shoe. Four great trainers that will suit the needs of really four different runners. In the tempo category, there's really only one shoe, and this is the Deviate Nitro 3. This shoe is one I'm looking for an update in 2026, but this has been a very popular shoe overall. And ending on their race shoes, there's the Fast R Nitro Elite 3 and the Deviate Nitro Elite 3. Two very distinct super shoes that suit very different types of runners and are both quite well loved in the running community. And overall, this is a fairly minimalist lineup. Now, Puma does make some other shoes, but these are the ones that I think really are important and are really distinct in the overall lineup. And at the end of 2025, I think you can really make two really good rotations with this overall lineup. I think there is what I'm going to dub an aggressive lineup, which are these three shoes. The Velocity Nitro 4 as your trainer, the Deviate Nitro 3 as your tempo shoe, and the Fast R Nitro Elite 3 as your race shoe. The Velocity Nitro 4 really pairs nicely with the Fast R3, and putting the Deviate Nitro 3 in there gives you some additional durability that you would need for some of that tempo training and some of the long runs where you don't really want to burn out the Fast R3, but you want something more than the flexibility of the Velocity Nitro 4. Really solid rotation overall. And then there's a second rotation, which I would dub relaxed, which starts with the Mag Max Nitro, puts the Velocity Nitro 4 in the tempo category, and then puts the Deviate Nitro Elite 3 as your race shoe. This is giving you the flexibility of that basic trainer in the Velocity Nitro 4, which actually works as a really good tempo trainer. Gives you the Max Stack cushioned Mag Max for easy running, recovery running, and it gives you still a very fast super shoe in the Deviate Nitro Elite 3, but not quite as aggressive as the Fast R3. But if you want to pare that down even more, I think you can make two really strong two-shoe rotations with this overall lineup. You can still do an aggressive lineup of pairing the Velocity Nitro 4 and the Fast R3 together. Again, those two shoes work exceptionally well. And you can take the Magnify Nitro 3, which is more of the all-around trainer, again, somewhere between the Velocity Nitro 4 and the Mag Max Nitro, and pair that with the Deviate Nitro Elite 3, and you get a relaxed but still very performance-based rotation. Any one of these rotations is going to work, and they're kind of some of the best in the industry as of the end of 2025. Overall, I'm ending 2025 looking at the Puma lineup being really impressed. There's some really distinct shoes in there that service really specific needs for runners. And again, you can build some really great rotations. As I said, some of the best in the industry right now. And because of the performance of this shoe and how much I've fallen in love with this shoe, I am really excited looking ahead into 2026. Because of this shoe, again, I'm covering Puma much more closer in 2026. But there are some things to pay attention to with Puma, and there's a couple things I'm looking out for, and there's one thing I'm a little bit worried about in 2026. I think the biggest thing that I'm watching for Puma in 2026, and I think everyone needs to watch this, is Puma's overall corporate stability. They have had a string of very bad years, and I think coming to the end of 2025, Puma is in a really bad financial spot as far as a corporate entity. For the past 12 months, their stock price is down 52%. Over the past 3 years, it's down 51.4%. Over the past 5 years, it's down 69.7%. They have not had a good string of years over the past 5 years. And I think those struggles have really come to a head in the past week because there's been a lot of headlines around Anta or Li Ning looking at a possible takeover for Puma. And with the Anta takeover, which seems like the most serious one, the day that was announced, about 8 hours later, the stock price jumped because of that news, because it was the first sign of any kind of real positivity for Puma at a corporate level. And about a month ago, there were also rumors that Puma and Adidas were exploring mergers. Now, for Puma and Adidas to explore, even talk about, even think about merging, you know that Puma is struggling given the history of those two companies. So that's how dire things are for Puma moving into 2026. And I think where this shakes out is really going to determine the future of Puma Running in 2026, but definitely beyond. Now, I think there's 3 possible outcomes of all of this talk. And the first one is saying Anta or Li Ning, but primarily Anta. They seem the most serious right now, and a lot of the press is really around Anta taking over Puma. That's probably the best scenario for Puma overall. Anta is the 3rd biggest sportswear brand in the world. They have a ton of money to invest in someone like Puma. Now, if you follow the Chinese running shoe brands, you know that the innovation for them is really fast. They take a lot of risks. They're not concerned about trying things. They really want to try things. And if you look at the Western market, I think Puma is positioned in the same way. They're a brand who really puts R&D at the center. They want to try things. They want to take risks. They want to put crazy things out onto the market. I think there's a really good synergy there. And I think if Anta does purchase and take over Puma, that connects Puma into a much bigger materials and R&D pipeline that I think they would really benefit from, especially Puma Running, because they really like to push boundaries, and this would just give them more capital and more resources to do exactly that. The second scenario is that Puma-Adidas merger. I think this one could be kind of meh for Puma mostly. Now, that would be at the board level. I don't think it would change anything day to day at Puma as far as, the brands coming together. I think they'd stay separate brands. Now, the hype beasts are really excited about this option because they're thinking about all sorts of Puma-Adidas collabs and combinations that you could get, which I don't know if you'd actually see. I think more the reality is at the corporate and board level, the budgets would actually be kind of pulled in on Puma, and business lines that are not doing well would probably be cut and moved off. I think Puma Running is one that's doing fairly well. But the other thing that I have to think about is that I'm sure there's a lot of materials and engineering and tech that Puma Running has done that Adidas Running would love to have. And I think if Puma Running all of a sudden went away, I also don't think Adidas Running would lose any sleep over that. So that Puma-Adidas merger, I think, isn't really the best option for Puma overall. And then the last one, which is really always the backup for any of these sort of merger or acquisition talks, if none of them actually work out, is for a private equity or a holding company to actually purchase the controlling stake in Puma. And I think that is the worst possible solution and outcome for Puma here. Because typically when that happens, those companies really just will look at the brand and they will just chop anything that is losing money or anything that really costs money. And all of the R&D and the crazy tech and all the press that Puma Running does, that costs a lot of money. So that likely would be one of the first things they'd look to either downsize considerably or cut altogether. And usually they'll just look at the heritage and the classic lineups from a brand, especially in footwear and sportswear, and they'll try to milk that as much as possible. And eventually the brand becomes just a discount store brand. We've seen this from a bunch of other brands. So that's the one that I hope doesn't actually happen to Puma. Now, as I said, this really does need to get resolved in 2026 because it is that dire for Puma at a corporate level. They cannot continue the way they've been going. Now, specifically for Puma Running, I think for the product launches in 2026 and possibly early 2027, I don't know how much this will affect them because the product development timeline for products is 18 to 24 months, and that's even pretty short in some instances. So all the product that would be coming out in 2026 and at this point early 2027, probably into summer 2027, is kind of already done. It's already in the queue. Manufacturing may actually be picking up. However, where this could affect it is distribution and further manufacturing. So it could be smaller batches and distribution may not be there as much as it has been in the past towards the end of 2026. So it's definitely something to watch for. But depending on which scenario actually happens for a takeover or merger or a holding company to come in, that will really dictate the future of Puma Running post 2027. Because any kind of budgets, any kind of spending on R&D, that will probably either be shut down or significantly reduced if it's not someone like Anta or Li-Ning actually taking over the company. And that will really affect Puma Running 27, 28, 29, the real future of Puma Running. And that would be a shame. Now, beyond that big macro thing that I just talked about, which again has to get resolved next year, there are two product-specific things I'm keeping my eye on for Puma in 2026. And the first one is really around their carbon plate development. Now, we know Puma is very happy to do crazy R&D, put these like really crazy shoes out there to market like the Fast RB. And they do these press events where they'll actually show some other prototype shoes of really pushing the boundaries. And the last one they did was at the Tokyo World Championships back in September, and that was the Fast XP series. These shoes, you probably saw these all around the internet. There was one shoe in there that I think really highlighted what I'm looking for in Puma specifically to carbon plates, and it was this shoe, the Fast XP SPT. This was a 200, 400 meter spike, but what was really interesting about this concept is that there's a split plate in this shoe. The medial side in this shoe is higher up closer to the foot, and the lateral side is lower, and that really is the spike plate. So it's really kind of leveraging two sides of the foot. That's a really interesting concept. Also, the back of the plate loops around, comes back, and goes to the other side. So it's one continuous loop of carbon. Really interesting concept. And what I've seen, I think in other videos that I've seen on the internet of Puma kind of showing off some of their plates, a lot of this was around the development of the Fast R3 earlier this year, is that they're really playing with this split plate or asymmetrical plate idea. And one that I would like to see from Puma is a combination of the high plate configuration and the low plate configuration. So you take the high plate and you put that on the lateral side, so the plate's close to the foot on the outside of the foot. And you take a low plate and you put that on the inside of the foot. So you're getting the benefits of the stability of a high plate where you can put a lot of foam under it to make the initial foot strike really nice and soft. And then you're getting the low plate, spoon of the plate, the curve of the plate, and the snap off the toe really where you need it. And if you put the cantilever plate in front of that, you're going to get even more snap. And that's going to be a really interesting plate. Now, Puma is definitely playing with these asymmetrical plates and split plates. In fact, I don't think anyone is doing that kind of plate development and experimentation other than maybe Hoka over on the trail side, and a little that came into the Cielo X1 series. But Puma's taking it and pushing it to a far new level. So that, I think, is going to result in some really interesting shoes moving forward. Maybe not totally in 2026, but beyond, assuming the financials for the company get worked out. And in 2026, we will probably see a Fast R4. Now, we've seen leaked images of this shoe already. It honestly doesn't look much different than the Fast R3, other than the heel bevel is actually a little less extreme. It looks like there's a little bit more stability in the heel of the Fast R4 prototype, at least what's being out there in the leak channels right now. And it's still probably pretty early for that shoe. So that should make the Fast R4 just a little bit more stable, a little bit more pleasant for midfoot striking and heel strikers especially. But I would expect a Deviate Nitro Elite 4 next year, and that's the one that could get some sort of new plate, something that makes that shoe really complementary to what they're doing in the Fast R platform. Again, exciting stuff with carbon fiber plates for Puma, and it's definitely the thing I'm going to be watching for next year and beyond. And the second thing I'm looking for from Puma in 2026 is really around their foams. Now, the other three brands I've talked about in this series, I've been talking about their foams and all of that, but I think Puma's in a bit of a unique situation here in that I don't think they really need to change or evolve their foams at all. They've done a wonderful job in 2024 and really refining it in 2025. The ATPU Nitro foam and the ATPU Nitro Elite foam are fantastic. They are probably two of the best foams you can buy on the market right now. But there's still a bunch of other foam chemistries that Puma is using, and what I'm really looking for is for them to clean that up in 2026. And this is what I mean. At the end of 2025, Puma has 5 different nitro chemistries in their lineup, and they have a very minimalist lineup, so pretty much every other shoe has a different foam in it at the current moment. And it breaks down like this. There's what I'm going to call Nitro 1, which is their TPEE foam. That's currently found in the Deviate Nitro 3, but that was also in the Velocity Nitro 3. That's that older classic, firmer nitro foam that Puma really had from the start. There's also what I'm going to call Nitro Elite 1. That's an ATPU-based foam, which was present in the Deviate Nitro Elite 3 on launch in 2024, but I do believe it showed up first in the Fast R2 in the heel in a revision to that shoe. There's also what I'm going to call Nitro 2, which is either a PIBA or EVA. It really depends on which specs and which source you're quoting from, but that's the foam found in the MagMax Nitro. And there's a foam in the Magnify Nitro, which is either one of those. It could also be the Nitro 1, the TPEE variant. There's also Nitro Elite 2, which is the ATPU foam found in the Fast R3. Now that feels like a different chemistry and a tweak to the formula that was previously in the Deviate Nitro Elite 3. It's a much better version. I remember trying on the Deviate Nitro Elite 3 and being kind of not impressed with the foam, but as soon as I put on the Fast R3 this year, I was blown away. There was a night and day difference between those two foams. And then there's what I'm going to call Nitro 3, which is the ATPU foam that's in the Velocity Nitro 4, which is probably one of the best training foams on the market right now. I would like to see all of these foams get cleaned up across the lineup. Now, Puma has tried to clean this up a little bit. Starting in the beginning of 2025, they really aligned all their foams around Nitro foam being training foams and Nitro Elite being racing foams. And they're not really selling chemistries of foams, and that's not the big marketing thing. They're more going for the feel of the foam. Very similar to what Adidas has done with Lightstrike Pro or Nike did with Zoom X. But in Nike's instance, at the end of 2025, there's really only 2 variants of Zoom X. There's a training variant and a racing variant, and you're kind of clear what you're going to get. And with Adidas, I do think they're trying to rein that in, and they're trying to also be very clear, especially for their current generation top-tier race shoes like the Adios Pro 4. I would like to see Puma really further refine this. And here's a good example of this. This shoe, the MagMax 2. This was a shoe that was just announced within the past few days of the recording of this video. This is a shoe that, if it is the same foam that was in the Velocity Nitro 4, I am very interested in trying, because I love the foam in the Velocity Nitro 4, and I would love to try it in a Max Stack Max Cushion shoe like the MagMax 2. But if this shoe isn't that new ATPU foam, it's the older TPEE, or it's the PIBA or EVA based foam that was in the MagMax 1, I'm not really that interested. So again, I really want to know what foam is in this shoe, and I wish Puma would clean this up and be really clear in their marketing about what material is going to be in there. Now, everything that I've seen about the MagMax 2, it does look like and it's being implied that it is the new ATPU foam in that shoe because it's lighter, says it's bouncier. Those are all things that got labeled to the Velocity Nitro 4, but it's not really clear. Though I'm sure with TRE 25 starting within the next few days of the recording of this video, we'll get some clarity on that from shoe tubers that are on the spot. The other thing that I said already about Puma's foam is that if they don't do any further development on the Nitro ATPU, the one that's in the Velocity Nitro 4, and the Nitro Elite ATPU, the one that's in the Fast R3, and they just carried those foams over to all of their new shoes in 2026, I think they'd be totally fine. I don't think they would be behind. If anything, they'd still be where they are at the end of 2025 with probably two of the best foams that you can buy currently in running shoes. So Puma, from a foam standpoint, is in a really good spot. They just need to clean up the line and be clear what's actually in what shoe. Overall, I think Puma had an outstanding 2025. The Fast R3 was probably the most talked about super shoe of the year, and I think it brought a level of performance that was unheard of for non-elite runners. I think elite runners maybe struggle a little bit with the Fast R3, but non-elite runners I think really benefit from a lot of the plate dynamics in that shoe, and especially that cantilevered toe. I made a video that talks about super shoe innovations, and I put the Fast R3 cantilever toe in that video because I think it is that important. I'll put a link in the description to that video if you want to see it. But I think Puma is leaving 2025 with a great lineup in their running line. And again, looking ahead into 2026, I think we're going to see some iterative tweaks on some shoes. We're going to see a couple new shoes with some big foam updates and big technology updates, mostly the DVA Nitro, both the normal and the elite version. And I think that's really going to bring some much needed performance to both tempo and an alternative race shoe overall to complement the Fast R3 and probably Fast R4 by the end of 2026. So if Puma can get the corporate stuff figured out, I think Puma Running is in a really good spot moving into 2026. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you want to support what I do here, check out sagasurunning.com for merch or click the join button below. I recently updated my membership perks, so check those out. Neither one of those options are good for you. Leave a comment and a like because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.